is available online. It wasn't available before now. But it is available for you to look at when you get home. I didn't put it up there on purpose because I didn't want people to go up there and get it ahead of time, because then you spoil all my fun when I have a different class. So it is available now for you to look at. What I want to talk to you about today, I want to talk about that idea of the language you speak influencing how you think, and talk about that in a little bit more in depth than it's discussed in your text, more in depth than it's described on the handout, and show you some interesting film clips and some interesting examples to give you a better idea of how the language we speak influences not just the things we have words for and the things we talk about and how we talk about them, but it actually affects the structure of our mind. And can, depending on the language you speak, you may actually physically perceive the world in different ways, which is kind of fascinating. So first I want to talk about the distinction between linguistic determinism and linguistic relativity. Now, linguistic determinism is the idea that the language you speak specifically determines how you think. So if you speak a particular language, you will think a particular way. Okay? It's not just an influence, it's that linguistic structure physically defines the structure of your mind. And it may influence things in your life, abilities that you have, that have, in general terms, nothing to do with language. Like it may actually influence the way, for example, you see color or don't see color. And it doesn't seem that being able to see color or not see color should have anything to do with your language. Either you can see the color or you can't see it. But it turns out that what words you have for color in your language can actually affect your ability to see different colors, which is kind of fascinating. And so that determinism part, that idea that it determines it, it makes it happen, it's a causal relationship. Then there's the idea of linguistic relativity, which is slightly different. And this just says that the language you speak influences you, but it doesn't control how you think. In other words, it may influence how you think about the world. But you can learn other languages, and those other languages will influence you too. But you still have freedom of thought, you can learn other ways of thinking. You're not restricted by your language, trapped in a way. Okay, so one is a very strong claim that, for example, this claim has been made and since proven incorrect, that, for example, languages that don't have words for minutes and seconds and hours, the people who speak those languages aren't able to understand or experience time, right? That they don't experience time the same way that other people do. And that's false. There are just cultures where the idea of seconds and minutes and hours are irrelevant, right? Why would you have words for things if they're not relevant for your culture and your cultural values? If you don't do anything in terms of seconds, why would you need a word for that? Now, we think about seconds all the time, right? Shaving seconds off your time, right? Running a race, right? We're all about seconds. Oh my gosh, it took 12 seconds for me to download that song. It's taking forever, right? We're like down to that kind of minutia. But there are languages that don't have words for those things because they're just not relevant in their world. Nothing happens at that speed that they need to talk about. So does that mean they can't understand the concept of a second? No, they can probably learn the concept of a second, but it's not immediately relevant to them, so it's not like, yeah. So anyway, that's the idea. Now, there are also cases of things like, we can talk about subcases of linguistic relativity, like lexical relativity and grammatical relativity. And this has to do with lexical relativity. We talk about things that are lexical. We're talking about words. Okay, so the lexicon is your mental dictionary. A lexical item is an entry in that dictionary, right? It's a word that you know. A concept that you know and have a word for. So we talk about lexical relativity. Some languages vary in the number of words they have for things. So you might have heard the famous lie, and I'll be honest, it's a lie, total made-up story, that Eskimos have 100 words for snow, or 500 words for snow, or 2,000 words for snow, or some completely arbitrary big number that sounds like a lot to English speakers. And they say, well, we only have one word for snow. It's like, snow. It's like, and why do they have all these words for snow? Because snow is so important to their environment that they have to have lots and lots of words for snow so they can describe all the nuances of snow because it's critical to their survival. Now here in the United States, for example, we don't need all those words for snow, so we don't have them. Well, I mean, there are a lot of other cultures besides the Inuit culture, thank you, not Eskimos, Inuits, who live with snow. Like, what if you live in Norway or Sweden, right? I mean, hello, Vikings, Iceland, Greenland, right? There's lots of people who live with snow who don't necessarily have 500 words for snow. This is one of these weird things that people say to make a culture sound mysterious. But we also have lots of words for snow. We talk about, you can talk about snow, you can talk about sleet, you can talk about a blizzard, you can talk about a whiteout. We have lots of different words for talking about snow and things related to snow. We just don't think of it that way. But languages do vary in terms of the number of words they have in particular categories. And this may be relevant to how they think about the world and classify things in those categories. Then there's also the issue of grammatical relativity, that sometimes when we talk about syntax, that's sentence structure. Okay, those are when we talk about the syntax of a language, you're talking about the grammatical rules that let you make up sentences. We talk about morphology. Morphological rules are the rules that let us make up words, so that I can make up a new word like Swiffer, and you know that Swiffer is a noun, and that the action we do with Swiffers is swiffing, right? I need to go swift the kitchen, right? So you know how to make words in your language. That's what morphology is about. And then phonology is how you know what sounds are okay to use in your language and how it's okay to combine sounds. And in a given language, all of the rules that you know to make sentences, make words, and make sounds, those are all things you know. Those are the things that define you as a speaker of a language. All those different kinds of rules make up the grammar for your language. So sometimes the reason people sound like they're talking with an accent, or when they make mistakes in a language because they have an accent and they're applying the rules of the language they know to the language they're trying to speak, that's just because they don't actually know the full grammar. Their brain doesn't know all the rules for forming the sounds correctly, forming the words correctly, forming the sentences correctly. So the way your language, the rules that make up your language's grammar, may reflect cultural values too, and how you think about things. Okay, so these are both components of linguistic relativity. As an example, okay, I think this is really interesting, that studies been done to look at languages of the world to see what words they have for colors. And it turns out English has a lot of words for colors, many more than lots of other languages. But this study revealed that all languages in the world, every single language, they could not find one that did not have something that described black and something that described white. And everything else in the world was described in terms of some kind of black and some kind of white. Okay. So the whole world is divided into those two colors. So every language will have words for white and black. The next color they get, if they have 3 color words, and there are languages that have only 3 color words, is the word for red. And they might categorize things that we might think of as brown as red, or they might categorize things that we think of as brown as black, right? And yellow would be white or something like that. They're just categorizing the world in a different way with bigger zones of color all falling under the same label. If they have 4 color terms, they'll get green or yellow, but they won't get both. So they'll get green or yellow. When they get the 5th term, they'll get whichever one of those they didn't have before. So if their language had yellow first, then they'll get green next. If their language had green first, then they'll get yellow next. Then they'll get blue after that. Then brown, and then they may add things like purple, pink, orange, and so forth. Now, English still has remnants of this, right? So what do you call someone who has orange hair? A redhead, because we didn't have a word for that color. So we classified that color as red. That's why they call them redheads. In Japanese, you go up to a traffic light. The traffic lights are the same color as they are in the United States. So I would think of those as red, yellow, and green, right? But they didn't have a word for green that was commonly used in Japanese. They didn't have that. They would refer to them as blue. So you'll say, oh, the light's blue, you can go now, in Japanese. And I thought that was so weird because I'm looking at it and I'm going, it's not blue, it's green. And when I said, no, the light's not blue, it's green, they looked at me like I was high. They're like, no, we say the light's blue because historically that was the name for everything in the blue-green domain, and they didn't distinguish blue and green separately, so they said that it was blue. And it wasn't until Westerners came in and introduced the color green that they actually adopted a word for green, which is midori. And if you drink alcohol, you know that the green melon liqueur, right, because it's called a midori, that's the color of that melon, the honeydew melon, midori. That's why they picked that color. Just like we picked the word orange from the fruit orange because that was the closest physical thing. Or we'll call people with red heads a carrot top, right? Because that's another orange thing. So it's not uncommon to pick a color that connects to a food or some other common thing if you don't have a word for that. So you say it's like that color. So that's why someone with red hair was a carrot top, because their hair was the color of carrots. And we didn't have another word until I get from phonetics, which is about the study of how we make individual sounds in a language, to pragmatics, which is how we use language as a tool to share ideas and accomplish tasks. Okay, that's pretty. I'm going to give you an image like this to work with. You're going to learn this diagram because all of these different places that are marked on this image are places where human beings, they're parts of the mouth and the throat that human beings use to make speech sounds. All the way from the lips, all the way back through the mouth, down the back of the tongue, to the glottis, down here to where you bring air through your voice box, here in the larynx. This whole area, human beings have exploited for the purposes of producing language. And we're going to learn each of those different points. At least we're going to focus on the ones that are useful for speaking American English. That's the language that class is being offered, and so we're going to focus on those particular pieces. So we have these articulatory features. And we can describe how every sound in a language is made by talking about combinations of those features. Every single sound in every single language is made up of specific combinations of features. Now, the kinds of features we use include things like where in the mouth, where in this whole diagram, right, where in this whole structure, where is the maximum point of air constriction? Okay, so for example, if I make a sound where the maximum point of air constriction is my lips, like pa, 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 or ba, 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 or okay, so you can see my lips are clearly doing a lot of stuff there. all of those sounds are referred to as bilabial sounds because I use both lips. Bilabial sounds. So anytime we talk about a bilabial sound, we're talking about a sound where one of the primary articulating features is the two lips doing something important. Another thing that we talk about is not just we refer to that place of maximum air constriction. We refer to that as the place of articulation. Where in the vocal tract is the maximum point of constriction? That's place of articulation. The next thing we talk about when it comes to articulatory features is manner of articulation. So that is, how do you make the sound physically? For example, I'll go back to the sounds I did a second ago. And b, and all of those sounds are referred to as stops. And they're called stops because I actually stop the flow of air through my mouth for some period of time in order to make them. Right? If you try to make the P sound, you're actually stopping air in your mouth behind your lips and then you're letting it explode out. That's what makes the popping sound. Same is true with b. Okay, the reason you get that loud burst of air is because you've stopped the air in your mouth and at the lips, and then you release it. The last one, okay, I'm stopping the air through my mouth completely and allowing it to come out my nose. So that's also sometimes referred to as a nasal stop, because I'm stopping the air through my nose, but I'm letting the air go through, I'm stopping the air through my mouth, but I'm letting the air go through my nose. And nasal stops are the ones that sound weird when you have a cold, because you can't get the air through your nose. So you sound like something's wrong. All right, we will talk more about articulatory features next time, and I will bring you this super cool diagram and this chart. We're going to talk all about articulatory features. It's going to be a blast. All right, I'll talk to you in a bit. See you all.